Ms. Maynard, I want to ask you about some of the changes we've seen, because we've had challenges in the past with refugee flows. And I think one of the things that's different this time around is that in the past there was typically a situation where various elected officials, various local communities worked hand in glove with the various agencies to try and meet that flow of refugees. So there was a lot of communication, for example, between CBP and Border Patrol with mayors and town councils and the governor's office and their Department of Homeland Security. And one of the things we've seen with this administration is, for example, just large numbers of refugees dropped off in very random locations, at times in small towns with no bus stations, et cetera. So can you talk a little bit about those differences and what that impact is like of just having almost a level of intentional chaos to the way that they manage an already stressful situation?
Sure. I think you hit the nail on the head. It's intentional chaos. It's calculated chaos. There is very little coordination between CBP and local communities when they decide to do the right thing, which is release asylum seekers to come into the nation so that they can process their claims inside of the U.S. The problem with those releases is they happen randomly. People, community leaders will get phone calls within an hour basically from CBP saying, we've got 100 people, 150 people we're releasing, find the room, but we're going to come drop them off. And so what that leaves for communities is they're scrambling, right? They're scrambling to be able to allocate resources to meet the need and the influx of people. And luckily, I come from a wonderful community in Las Cruces and Deming, New Mexico, where our communities have stepped up to meet this need. But it really shouldn't be that way, right? It shouldn't be that these people have to find shelter, and it's always a constant scrambling to make sure that they're going to have adequate housing facilities, that they have enough volunteers to staff the needs. But it's normal now, unfortunately, that a lot of the needs are having to be met by communities. The administration really just doesn't care for human life. It's basically like, here you go, you all deal with it. And
talk a little bit about how communities like Deming and Las Cruces and others, as well as charities and NGOs like your own, have the work that you have done to try and fill that vacuum that in the past had always been borne by the federal government.
Sure, absolutely. So one of the largest is providing shelter. Just providing resources, actually doing the travel arrangements for people. So what happens is a lot of the migrants that pass through like Las Cruces or Deming, they're en route to other parts of the country to connect with family members they already have in the U.S. And it used to be that either CBP or ICE would make the travel arrangements to get them there. They would have done the on-the-ground work of calling the family members and ensuring that these migrants and their families get to their required destination for their check-ins and that kind of thing. That's no longer being done by the government. Like I said, it's essentially a phone call that's being given to community leaders saying, we're dropping off X amount of people, and you all deal with it however you're going to deal with it. And so our community leaders, what they've done is essentially they've mobilized, and you have a constant stream of volunteers, many of whom will put in 12 to 14 hours volunteering, making sure that, not only are people fed, but they're like coordinating travel, buying people's bus tickets, trying to get in contact with family members in different parts of the country. And it's great on behalf of the communities that they're doing that, but it really it shouldn't fall on them. That's not their jobs. That's on the government.
Going back to that idea of intentionally making a situation more chaotic, have you heard of situations where individual asylum seekers have been assigned to immigration courts or judges that were not where their sponsors are? So, for example, if their sponsors in New Mexico or California, they get assigned to a judge in Connecticut or Florida.
Yeah, that happens all the time. So what happens when an asylum seeker presents at the port of entry, their case will stay in El Paso, Texas, if that's where they entered, even if they told CBP and ICE, hey, I'm heading to New York City. And so it really slows the process down. And in a way, it's sort of meant to confuse and confound the asylum seeker, because typically the documentation that they're given, it just says you need to present at this court, but it doesn't give them the date or time that they're supposed to do it. It just says you need to call this phone number, and you should call it frequently to find out what date and time you're supposed to come back to El Paso, Texas, or wherever it is they happen to cross at the port of entry to have their cases heard.
Thank you.
Thank you.